All right, Ike. Well, a few fun news items this week here in the world of land rovering. The first one is a company called, and I'm going to get the name wrong, but I think it's Everati. Is it better if I say it with an accent? Does that make it easier? Does that make it sound better? Everati. Everati.
Is this a champagne startup?
It is, yeah. Well, it's only a Champagne startup if the Land Rover comes from the Champagne area of France. Otherwise,
So
it's just a sparkling Land Rover.
it's a fancier Alka-Seltzer.
Yeah, exactly.
Everati.
Everati. It's like I don't know. Anyways, Everati, who is apparently a famous, because I've certainly heard of them and know how to pronounce the name perfectly, famous EV conversion company, has added to their stable of fancy conversions of a Porsche, a Ford GT40, which I think is pretty cool. That's a pretty significant EV conversion. I'd like to see that. And they have now done a 2A, and it's actually, I have to say, it is in the upper echelon of niceness so far as EV conversions go. It still
Mhm.
looks pretty stock. They've done a few silly things, like they put on a silly wooden steering wheel so it looks like it's a Chris Craft boat and some of that sort of stuff. But for the most part, wood in the bed, which I know you have feelings about, but generally speaking, it's a pretty nice conversion. They've kept the car looking pretty stock, obviously very restored, looks very, very shiny new, but apparently it is a very livable EV conversion. They've done some things like they haven't done a serious amount of messing about with trying to make the transmission working and all of that sort of stuff. They've kind of embraced the EV-ness a little bit, but at the same time, sort of retained some of the functions and things like that. The interior looks, more or less stock. I mean, everything, of course, is covered in brown leather and things like that.
It's
And
got a lot of wood and a lot of trim. I'm looking at the photos now,
yeah,
and
and it's like the engine cover seems to be made of quilted leather, which I think is one of
at
my
first I
favorite.
thought it was wood.
Yes,
It looked like
piece of
I thought it
wood.
was
Yeah,
matching the little bed cover or whatever.
yeah, yeah.
But
It's pretty
yeah,
nice.
it's
I mean,
got
it's a great. It's like it's the seafoam green color, that light pastel green color.
mhm,
So
mhm.
it's got some nice things. I think of all the EV2A conversions that are out there, this isn't a bad one. Looks pretty good. It is $175,000, however.
I mean,
So
that's not too out of the realm of cost on these sorts of cars. I would say that for that amount of money, I would like to have the wiper motor cover fitted to the car. It's
right,
missing in this
it is.
picture of the dashboard,
It sure
and
is. Yeah,
it's just gone. I don't know
yeah,
why they
yeah,
didn't put
yeah,
that on there. And I'm also noticing that it's got like it's a 2A and it has
yeah.
a Series 3 turn signal switch on it, and
Sure
they've
does.
made some sort of little baseball that goes around the switch to
Yeah,
like
it's kind
cover
of like a
up,
baseball glove. Yeah,
yeah, the fact
yeah,
that it's the wrong one. And
yeah,
then
and
it's
it
got like
also
a
has a
flat,
very modern top, which I don't love. It's got a snap-on Defender style top. So
yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
if
it's
you
okay.
look at the dashboard, if you look at the left-hand side,
Yeah.
it's got an auxiliary cover that's stamped and factory.
Yes.
And on the right-hand side, it's just a flat plate. Like you
Yes.
would think that you would make those
The same.
symmetrical.
Symmetrical.
Yeah,
Yes.
the same. The
Yeah.
same.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if I was getting picky, I would start to point out some things like that that would be easy to fix, but maybe make it a little bit more complete. I also noticed
Yeah.
it doesn't have any grab handles on the back row of the
Yeah. That's
crossmotor.
a party
How
foul. Yeah.
That's a pet peeve of mine. Like,
Not
how
having the
many of
grab
these,
handles.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, like these $200,000 series Land
They're
Rovers that
missing
are
a $50
restored, like
galvanized part.
the Falcons and
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah.
all these
Yeah.
ones on Instagram, you
Yeah.
see them
Yeah.
and they're like missing half the stuff on the back
Yeah.
of the car. The
Easy
hitch is
stuff.
missing,
Easy stuff.
the grab handles are missing.
Yeah, like stuff you could get from Britpart. Not even hard to find items. Like stuff
Yeah,
that's
like the
just easy to get.
cool and vintage and
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Falcons and
Yeah.
they got these beautiful cars and like half the parts are gone.
Yeah. There's lots of
Just
stuff
missing.
missing. Yeah.
Like nobody'll know. Nobody'll notice.
Maybe they subscribe to the Jerry McGovern reductive design philosophy. They've just taken all
Oh,
the
there you
extra
go.
bits off. They want
But
to
they leave all
de-bits.
the holes
Well, the holes are still
that
there.
stuff mounts
Yeah,
to.
no, you don't want to like fill that in, but you leave the hole. It's fine. Yeah,
I have definitely had conversations with builders and I'm like, why doesn't this have, a heater and grab handles and,
yeah,
like a hitch and stuff? And they're like, oh, that's because we want it to be clean in terms of
Right.
design. And you're like,
Sure.
well, then why didn't you just delete all the holes?
Just take the holes out then. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, like when a builder goes through and like really deletes all that stuff and smooths it all like a chip foose kind of thing, like they're really cool. If you just leave the holes though, it's a different thing. It looks like something's missing.
It just means you're lazy.
You're
That's
just lazy.
and cheap. You're
It's
lazy
not
and cheap.
reductive at all. It's just
No.
laziness. It's just laziness.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of electric, as I know it is your favorite topic, the fine folks at Wolfspeed, which is a
Wolf speed.
manufacturer of like specialty doodads for electric vehicle race cars, specifically for the Formula E range. Wolfspeed has been contracted by our good friends at Jaguar Land Rover to build the silicon carbide inverters that will be going in all future Jag and Land Rover EVs. That part, the SiC, apparently, is being used currently by the Jaguar Formula E team, and that SiC will be used in all future Jag EVs. So.
Lander was just going around like a junkie. You got some chips? You got some chips?
Any chips?
Anybody got some chips? I think all manufacturers are doing that right now.
Yeah,
They're
I
just
think it's
going.
exactly right.
They just, you got any chips? Got any chips? We
They
need some
will
chips.
be it will be joined by a brushless motor from a Roomba and the little actuator thing that unlocks the front door at your building with the key card thing. They're also using some of those, I believe. So yeah, anywhere they can get anything, they are.
Take what you can get.
Yeah, take what you can get. The new EV Defender will be powered by 4 DeWalt cordless drills, and and one of
That'd
those
be sweet.
EcoFlow battery packs. That's how it's gonna work. And you know what? I think we may give that
That'd
a
be
go.
fine.
Yeah, I think it'd be totally fine. We get the impact. You'll have 3 speeds of impact. You can, if you're going up a hill, you just kind of put it in the slow one, and yeah, it's gonna be great.
Mhm.
I think it'll be great. Speaking again, this is an all EV news segment, as it turns out. I didn't realize that until just now, but all EV news
This
segment.
is a sign.
It
This
is
a sign.
It is a sign. It is a sign. It is a sign. The fine folks again at Jaguar Land Rover have announced a charging program. So they have like 2 EVs, no EVs technically, except for that Jaguar one. But I don't think they actually make the E-Pace, right? Or the whatever it's called, the E-Speed, E-Type. Well, it's not E-Type. It's a F-Pace, and it's an F thing.
FU
Anyways,
pace.
the FU Pace, the electric one. I don't actually think they make it anymore, but they're hybrids. There are those,
Mhm.
and hopefully the electric Range Rover next year. Looking very forward. I guess it's not next year; it's 24, right? Is the electric Range Rover?
Yes.
But looking very forward to that. Maybe we've heard rumors of an EV Defender in 25. That sure would be cool. But they have launched a program starting in the UK that will allow you to use chargers, which I don't exactly understand why that's news, because you could just sign up for like any one of 36 different charging networks and just charge your car. But there will be some inbuilt charging network now support in new EV Land Rovers and Jaguars that will eventually extend to 27 countries, giving you 3,000 plus per country, apparently, chargers. Now, here in California, I mean, I think there's 3,000 plus chargers here in Los Angeles. I think that's not necessarily novel. I don't know what the charging infrastructure is like in the UK. I don't know how many people are charging, how many EVs there are there. Obviously, here in Los Angeles, if you took away every Tesla in Los Angeles, you would decrease the car population, I think, by 30%. So there are quite a
It's a
few
lot.
chargers here. It's a lot. It's a lot.
There's a lot.
A lot of crypto bros, and every one of them has a Tesla, and it's all been wrapped like olive drab green. It's very important. Those 3 things. You have to have bought a lot of like shitty coin. You have to have bought then Ethereum.
Shitcoin.
You bought some shitcoin. You bought some shitcoin, and with the small amount of proceeds from that, you've heavily leveraged yourself into a very expensive Tesla Model X, and then you've immediately taken that Tesla Model X and you've wrapped it camo or drab green or something, or flat black, so that in the sun, the interior, the body panels heat up to 3,000 degrees. So very important.
I don't know why the
Everybody have
dash is warped on this car.
that. Yeah, I don't know. The entire car is the shape of a noodle now. I don't know why. How did that happen? Yeah, it's interesting. The Teslas are all metal bodies, so you're just taking that heat and you're just sinking it into the batteries, prepping
Speaking
yourself for a major
of
fire.
things that have been sitting in the sun for a while,
Yeah.
I have seen that there is a peculiar Land Rover for sale by the government of Canada, believe it or
Exactly.
not.
Well, by the time this show posts, which is the only reason we're talking about this, because of course, like secret Land Rovers in the United Kingdom, it seems like nefarious sales of Camel trophy cars in the United States is something that, like, ooh, nobody wants to talk about it. This car is already sold. So good luck by the time you hear this. It hasn't at this moment, but by the time you hear this, it'll have already sold. So good luck to whomever has purchased it. And if you want to get into contact with us and talk about it, we'd love to hear from you. But yes, I can gossip. There is, in fact, a camel trophy discovery in the possession of the Canadian Border Guard, and they are selling it for export only, which would
Yeah.
mean it cannot stay in Canada. And in fact, it must go to, I mean, I imagine at the closest here in the United States, if it can be resolved, or potentially back to the United Kingdom where it came from. But it is a real Camel Trophy car. It was apparently used by the Japanese team. I believe it's a 96, 97 car. Is that right? I think something like
I think
that.
it is. Yeah.
And
It looks pretty complete.
it is complete. It is complete with about 70 pounds of rust because it has, unfortunately, been sitting outside for 4 full years since it was confiscated, apparently around the start of the pandemic. I guess maybe that's why it's been sitting
They
for
like
such a long
hosed
time.
it down with salt too before. And the roof is just eaten away on the
Oh,
gutter
so
area. I mean, it's
so
fixable, and
nice.
there's a lot of
Sure.
like rare, unique parts on it, and it's
Yep.
it's definitely a fixable car.
Yeah, for sure. It is currently sitting in Montreal, Quebec. So it's not far from the United States. It wouldn't be such a big deal to transport it. We've talked to a few parties who wish to remain nameless about the car to get some sort of guesses around what happened. I will tell you this, Mike, this is my guess. And I don't want it in any way to disparage those of American birth. But my theory here is that it was a person in
A person.
the United States
Okay.
that decided that this was the perfect car for them.
Mhm.
They purchased it. It is a known car. It is part of the Camel Trophy Club. The previous owner is a known person, and it could be searched in the Camel Trophy Owners Club, annals, and you could certainly look up what it's. But I believe this is non-substantiated. This is nonsense. This is like
This is a fan theory.
this is a fan theory. This is fan fiction at this point. Fan theory
Mhm.
that a gentleman or lady or child or someone of purchasable ability, an estate maybe, a restaurant chain, hobby store
Could you
maybe,
use more words to describe this person?
purchased this car from someone in the United Kingdom, and knowing that at the time, most likely, if this was 4 years ago, 25-year rule, I mean, you're right on the edge of being able to import this thing, they would bring it to Canada because 15 years in Canada, you can bring it in, no problem. And then they would take it from Canada and they would simply drive it to the United States, which of course has never happened before. Nobody has ever done that. It's treasonous to even think about it. And that at some point during that ill-fated journey were stopped either in the province of Quebec, which does not allow you to have a right-hand drive vehicle, which is maybe a little known fact for those of you outside
Yeah,
of
I didn't know
America.
that.
But ask our good friend Dixon Kenner if you can drive a right-hand car. You can maybe drive it through if it's registered in another province, but there's no way you'll ever register it there. The Quebecois does not care for right-hand drive vehicles. So perhaps
Why can you have that in one part of the country but
the
not in another?
interesting thing about Quebec in general is that answering the question why, just generally speaking, is very difficult. Because
Yeah, it's
why Quebec? We don't know.
exercise in frustration.
We don't know. It's just you know what? It's a beautiful province, and Montreal's an incredible city, and lots of good friends there and good time spent there. But generally speaking, the question of why Quebec cannot be answered. So
The only thing that I know about Quebec is that it is the origin of savoir-faire,
that's true.
the mouse nemesis
Mhm.
to Klondike Cat.
That's correct.
And
Yes.
his famous
Yes.
catchphrase, savoir-faire is everywhere.
It's exactly right. Yes.
It's the only
Yeah.
thing I know about Quebec.
That poutine and Montreal smoked meat sandwiches, which is kind of like a pastrami sandwich, but different and better.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know what else, maple syrup. There's famously the Canadian Strategic Reserve of maple syrup is in Montreal.
I
Famously,
think
it
we
was
talked about
robbed.
that on the
Yeah, it was
show.
robbed at one point. Yeah, we talked about that on previous show. There's a great documentary about it. But anyways, I detract. So my theory is that an entrepreneurial American purchased this car, imported it into Montreal, not knowing that that is a dubious place to try to import a car. Maybe got it in, possibly got it in, and jumped in that car looking to drive it across the border, and was stopped either by the RCMP or possibly at the border. And hilarity ensued, as I'm sure that car was confiscated and eventually turned back to the border guard. And then with COVID and everything else happening, perhaps some legal wrangling around it, it sat outside in Montreal, which gets snow. And more importantly, it gets this sort of freezing rain stuff that creates like a hard shell of ice around everything. And so it probably went through that a few times. I mean, this poor car. Now, the funny thing is if you go to the same website, and I'll go sometimes because especially the Canadian Forces base in Suffield in Alberta, that was a joint operations base, and they used a ton of Series 3s there. So sometimes you'll find just like they'll have a crate of Series 3 head gaskets, and you can buy 200 Series 3 head gaskets from the CFB Forces base for, $100. And so I'll look sometimes, but most of their stuff is indoors, which is interesting. They usually keep like those little Bombardier cars and everything. They keep them
Mhm.
inside, not this Camel Trophy truck. It is outside. In fact, a good friend who will remain nameless, that you can actually look up this facility on Google Maps, and you
And
can
see it.
see the Camel Trophy truck parked in the yard. It's been there so long. It's been photographed by satellite. So yeah, so it's sitting there. The legal, the legality of being able to bring it into the United States, I'm sure there are individuals that could do it. Our good friend Will Hendrick, I'm sure, is the man to solve that problem. Perhaps, there are others. There's ways to do it, but it is not a slam dunk. There are some wiggly bits around it. I guess the ownership thing is a little cloudy and some of that, but it's just fascinating that a Camel Trophy truck is in the possession of the Canadian government and has been impounded for 4 years in
And is
Montreal.
basically on sale on their equivalent of Government Planet, right?
Yeah, it's on the Canadian Gov Planet, which is called Gov Canoe. Yeah, you can head over there. You can't because it's already gone. This was recorded in the past, so I could go right now. I'm not going to, but I could. I could go and buy this car right now, but I won't. But it is purchasable. It was purchasable. So
It was
interesting.
searchable.
I'm interested to know. I think they want 10 grand Canadian for it right now. That's what the sort of bid is at. What do you think? If you had to, I mean, this thing is pretty clapped out. Like in the words of our very good friend Joe, it is pretty chooched. But would you
It's
buy it? What do you think?
it's complete.
It is.
It looks fairly original.
It
It
does.
has some significant rust in the roof and maybe in other places because it was in the UK. So
Yes.
it's probably been exposed to some salt. And
Yep.
if it's one thing that vintage Land Rover Discoveries are good at, it is collapsing in on themselves
Yes.
like a black hole.
It's true.
A brown,
It's true.
but more like a brown
A
flaky hole. Anyway,
flaky hole. Yeah. I think that might be a different thing. That might be
so
a different thing.
so but it is repairable with like readily available pieces,
Yep.
and you would have a pretty complete, largely original Camel Trophy car, and
Yep.
it's a cool vintage.
Yep.
That has a 300 TDI in it, and so it's a very much more drivable car than some of the earlier Camel Trophy cars that
Yeah.
have like 2.5-liter diesels
Yeah.
in them
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know, maybe 30 grand. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's what sort of what I was thinking as well. Here's how I look at it. That car probably needs somewhere in the neighborhood of about $50,000 of work to make it just perfect, right? And there would be no reason to do a sympathetic restoration of this car. There's nothing to sympathetically restore. It is chooched. I love that. I know it's Joe's word, but
You're
I
on the
really
Chooch
inherited it.
bandwagon.
Man, I love the
Yeah.
chooch. Anyways, it's pretty clapped out. And so I think you'd spend a good amount of money on it. But given the fact that a Camel Trophy Discovery, probably minimum sale price on a car like that is probably 70,000, and we've certainly seen them go above 100. Now, this doesn't have the pedigree of a winner or of a vehicle of significant note because
Mhm.
it was driven by a particular person, a Jim West or somebody who is, knows the history of the vehicle and everything. This was the Japanese team in this year's event. They didn't do anything significant. They didn't win anything. but it still went to the event. It was still a team car. Those are cool. Team cars are always more destroyed than the organizer cars because they just get abused. So they often are in rougher shape, but I think that's offset a little bit because of their sort of collectability. So yeah, I mean, I think if you were to pay 25 to 30,000 US for this, you put another 40 or 50,000 in it, you'd kind of be in that $70,000 ballpark, 70, $80,000. And
You
I think you could
spent
probably get that out of it.
$40,000 working out the logistics as far as the titling and registration is
That's the
concerned. Then
trick.
another
Exactly.
$40,000, $50,000
Yep.
restoring it. Then
Yes.
you'd have a $75,000 car.
That's exactly right. That's the tricky part is like, is the if you can register it and if it could ever be rendered sellable again, then, sure. But I think there's big effort to be put into doing that.
Sure.
I would certainly suggest, you want to get somebody like Will Hendrick or something to just sort of deal with it for you because it's going to be a dubious border crossing and that sort of stuff. So, I don't know that even with all the, times I've done that and stuff, I'm not sure I would want to take this particular one on. But yeah, could it be made into a great car again? Absolutely. Should it be 100%? It shouldn't be like purchased and parted out or anything. I think it could be rendered, operable and somebody could have a ton of fun with it. I think, and I hope that's what happens. I hope an enthusiast purchases it. And, if you're not looking to make huge money off of it right away, certainly taking the time to obviously get it registered and everything, make it legal, but then to put the time into fixing it, it's a discovery. It's very fixable. There are there are entire generations of people in the UK that have been restoring, I mean, sometimes the same discovery over and over again, like the Brooklyn Bridge. Every
Yeah.
every decade, it gets completely rebuilt because it's rusted to
They
shit
just
over the course of
start
the
at
last
the
year.
other end once
Yeah,
they finish the
just work
car.
back and forth. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. What do you think? Are you gonna purchase it? You think add it to the stable up there at the old Pangolin 4x4?
I have a perfect track record of not owning Discoveries.
Yeah.
So I think it's likely I will keep that intact.
You don't think this is the one that will finally worm its way into your heart?
Mm, maybe, but
If you
probably
start
not.
to feel that inkling, you can always come and help me rebuild the fuel injection pump on my on my Discovery anytime you want.
Send
Anytime
it
you
up
want.
here. I'll fix it.
Yeah, it'll be good. I got to get it out. I just have to get it out. I just have to find the time. Find the time. So, speaking of what you would think about when it comes to restoring a vehicle, it is everybody's fourth favorite segment. What to look for? What to look for when
I think we only
buying?
have 3 segments.
Yeah, we only have like 3 segments. This is the part of what to look for when buying, and we're finally up to what to look for when buying a Land Rover Defender. Land Rover
What?
Defender. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I have a few of them. They're great. They're a lot of plastic. If you think you didn't like the amount of plastic that was in the Series 3, let me introduce you, my friend, to the Defender, where not
That's
only is
next
the
level.
interior plastic, but there's a ton of plastic in the engine too. So,
Yeah, in the engine and like around the body,
Oh, yeah.
the fenders and
Oh,
got these
yeah.
big plastic wheel arches, and some of the later ones have plastic on the bumpers,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I famously, anytime I visit our good friends at Eastner Castle, now they don't have the classic Defenders there anymore, but when they did, I would knock off one of those little plastic bumperlets on the outside. It is, I've been there several times. Rob and the gang, all very good friends. Griff and everybody has been always wonderful to us anytime we're there. But 100% of the time now, I've never left without knocking one of those things off of the front bumper. So
I didn't realize that when we saw them behind Classic Works, you should have just knocked another one off.
should
while
have
it was
just
sitting
kicked
there.
it off.
Yeah, yeah, just
Yeah.
out of spite. Well, this might have to be a 2-part segment because
Yeah.
there's a lot to talk about.
There
on the
is.
Defender, but,
It's a huge thing. Well, let's talk about
know-
first of all, when you roll up on, let's say you're just in the market for a Defender. What's your favorite Defender to look for? Do you like a NAS spec Defender and think it's worth paying that premium, or are you looking for a rest of the world car, either diesel or even one of the older, newer TDIs or older 2.5 liters?
I haven't had a lot of Defenders. I've maybe had 6,
Mhm.
and 2 of those were NASCARs, and the rest were rest of the world cars. And I would say that if I was going to look for a car, I would prefer the 95 to 97, 98 vintage.
Mhm.
I like that vintage of Defender. It
Mhm.
has the 300 TDI
Mhm.
R380.
Mhm.
Great combination, good parts availability,
Mhm.
lack of exterior electronic controls
Yep.
for that drivetrain.
Yep.
Very reliable, and it's pretty easy to own those cars.
Yep.
Unfortunately, most of the cars that have that configuration in the United States have come from England.
Yes.
And England is much like, the series cars, the worst
The
place to
worst place in the
buy
world.
a
Yeah.
Land
Right.
Rover.
Yeah.
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 It's a big island of salt,
Yeah.
in the middle of an ocean of salt.
Yes.
And so they're typically extremely, extremely rusty cars. And
Yep.
that's absolutely true of the Defenders as well, maybe even more so.
Yeah.
There's some really rusty cars, especially in the upper bulkhead area.
Hmm.
The upper bulkhead of a Defender, for whatever reason, tends to rust substantially more
Yes.
than a
Yes.
series car.
Yes. When
Substantially
fundamentally
quicker.
they're not that different, but somehow I
No.
agree. They managed to really figure out how to really suck up. In fact, as we've said before, every subsequent series of Land Rover, they did figure out how to make them rust more efficiently. And
That's
certainly
true.
by the time I think they had perfected it in the Defender, by the time the 2016 TDCI Defenders rolled off the line, they would already be rusting in the factory during assembly. They had actually started that process. So
Now, some of those cars have really nice doors.
yeah.
Those later cars,
Yes.
they have a really nice galvanized door that's
Mhm.
sturdy, and that's like post lawsuit, right? The earlier Defenders, from like 84 through 2001, maybe,
Mhm.
is it?
Yeah, I think that's what
I
it is,
probably
yeah.
have that last year wrong, but
Yeah.
those doors are very rust prone, and
Yeah.
so it certainly pays to inspect the doors. The aftermarket doors are not nearly as nice as the factory
No.
doors, but if I'm buying one of these cars, I want to get it from a dry climate country,
Mhm.
like
Mhm.
a Spain and
Yep.
Italy,
Yep.
Southern Europe sort of situation,
Yep.
or like an Australia interior
Mhm.
non-coast
Mhm.
place. I
Mhm.
like those left-hand drive cars. They tend to bring more of a premium here,
Yep.
but depending on where you live, that might not matter. And
That's right.
the right-hand drive ones drive just as good as the left-hand drive ones. But
Especially not if you're
if
in Quebec. Don't
yeah,
don't even
yeah,
try it.
don't get one in Quebec.
Yeah.
But the things to look for on these cars, number one is always going to be rust. The
Mhm.
number two thing is, does it have a 19J engine? If it
Mhm.
does, don't buy it, because
Right.
those engines are awful. They're
Yeah.
awful. They
Yeah. Yeah.
they have a very high tendency to crack.
Mhm.
It's Land Rover's like basically first generation of turbo diesel,
Mhm.
and they did not have the metallurgy
They didn't
or
have it figured out. No.
engineering to
No.
underpin that, and they're unreliable. They
Yeah.
they just always crack. The only ones you see that run that aren't cracked or broken are really, really low mileage examples. So it's
Mhm.
kind of interesting. You see these really low mileage cars that come up for sale, and people get really excited about them, and they're like, "Oh, it's only got 40 or 50,000 miles on it," and the rest of the car's in really good shape. But the engine's
It's a
gonna
time
blow
bomb.
up.
It's a time
It's a
bomb.
time bomb.
It's
It's
like a
gonna
NAS
happen.
Defender that has never had head gaskets replaced. You're like, well, it's only a matter of time.
Yeah,
It's gonna
that's a
happen.
good point. You bring up a good point. The NAS Defenders, of which I've had a few, those cars, they have a lot more electronic controls on the engine, a lot of
Yeah.
sensors.
Yep.
They're all V8s. They're usually the 3.9
Mhm. 3.9 of the
in
4.
the
Yeah.
NAS Defender.
Mhm.
And those cars in 94 and 95 and 97, they imported Defender 90s, and the 97s are all automatic.
Mhm.
The previous ones are LT77 or R380 cars.
Mhm. Mhm.
Of those, I like the 95s. Those are
Mhm.
my favorite. That's
Mhm.
the manual with the
The R380
R380.
in it. Yeah. And the 4-liter
Yeah.
engine. Yeah. Mhm.
Arliss blue is probably my
Yeah.
favorite color for
That's a great
those,
color. Yeah. Yeah.
an Arliss blue 95 D90 wagon.
Wagon.
That's
Yeah.
probably
Mhm.
my favorite of
Mhm.
those cars.
The
And then,
new Defender that is sort of the homage paint scheme to that car is also my favorite Defender 90 currently. I just think that blue
yeah,
white combo, it looks super cool.
it
Um,
is.
those cars,
It's
the NAS
definitely
cars
the
had the
best
mag
color.
wheels, but you could switch them to the white steel wheels. It's a smart looking combo. I agree. I think that's my favorite as well.
But as you said, prone to head gasket failures, so always pays to test the coolant for exhaust gases on those vehicles. The 93, they imported the Defender 110s,
Mhm.
and those are a special car in and of themselves. There's a little over 500 of those that they imported into the US and Canada. They're always Alpine white, except for like one that belongs to Ralph Lauren. It's
Ralph
a
Lauren, yeah.
black one,
Yeah, his
I
black
believe.
one, yeah. Yeah, he does.
Yeah, and they have an external safety devices roll cage because they didn't pass
Didn't even
safety.
remotely come close to rollover standards here in the United States. Yeah, so
Yeah, so they
yep.
slapped a safety devices roll cage on them, and they put a roof rack on top of that, and
Yep.
put a bull bar on them. I think those original MSRP on those cars was like 38,000. Is that
Yeah,
right?
they were nothing.
40,000.
They were zero. Yeah, they're $0. They were super cheap, and the roll cage for that car now is $38,000. So
It's
know,
very
without
expensive.
question, super
Yeah,
expensive. Yeah, super
very
expensive.
expensive.
Yeah.
So those are neat cars. I've had one of those. But one thing I don't like about those NAS 110s is that they did away with the scuttle vents.
Hmm.
So, you know, in a car like that that doesn't have maybe the world's greatest HVAC system, some additional ventilation is welcome.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
the scuttle vents, for whatever reason, I don't know who thought this was a good idea, were completely blanked off. Like they
Yeah.
didn't have an opening in those
Yeah.
cars.
Yeah.
And then they have like a big gray plastic like insert in the
Yeah.
dashboard. It has all of the warmth and charm of like a budget shower stall from Home Depot. Like it's just
That's
like
true. Yeah, it really does.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's just like hanging out in a
Yeah.
fiberglass shower stall.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
interiors are not
Yeah.
my favorite.
No, they're not. They're
Interiors.
not great. And yeah, it's interesting because like the bulkhead of the UK equivalent to that car still had scuttle vents through the TD5. So they had to go way out of their way to delete those in order to put in more Jeep looking dash because it does look pretty similar to the Jeep dash of, its contemporary of the same time period. They look pretty similar.
They're like, oh, we're putting air conditioning in it. Why would anyone want operable vents in their
Nobody would
bulkhead?
ever want to use the
Yeah,
outside
who
air
would
when we
who
can
would want that?
pump it in this thing that will likely break a week after you buy it. But yeah, no, I mean, obviously we have the NAS 90 and the rally car is a NAS 90, which we've gotten more than a few people who have mentioned our misuse of such a collectible automobile. Little did
Terrible,
they
you've
know.
ruined it.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I ruined it a long time ago. It used to be
Terrible.
soft top, but I modified the roll cage, which meant stripping off all the padding and changing the
Oh, that's
configuration of the bars.
value just plummeted.
Oh, I know, to
Collector value just
stick a military wolf roof on it for when I had it back in Canada. So no, it's been thoroughly destroyed. But the thing is, because I'm never going to sell it, it doesn't really matter. But I do love the individuals. There are a few here in Los Angeles that will, that buy NAS Defenders and will occasionally come and buy parts from me. They'll look at the rally car, the something else or whatever. And when I tell them that I stripped the padding off of the roll cage, it's always that same thing. They're like, dude, do you know how much that's worth? And I'm like, bro, I totally do. And I don't give a shit. It's fine, man. And they're like, oh, I can't imagine it. It's like, it's worth so much money. And I'm like, you know what? It's actually worth nothing because I would never sell it. It's like, it's not a car. It's not a car that I would ever sell. It's Cooper's problem to deal with in the future when we're all dead.
Well, she'll be cursing the fact that you remove the roll bar padding.
Oh, I'm sure she's like, oh no. Or Liza in general will roll it into the ocean or something, or I don't know.
If only Dad hadn't done that.
This would be worth so much money. It'll be worth so much money because it'll be such a famous rally car.
So if you're buying an NAS 90, the lesson there is make sure it has good roll bar padding.
Good roll bar padding. Yeah, they do make a replacement for it now. You can get a replacement for the roll bar padding.
Also
There's
expensive.
A few things. Yeah, it's super expensive, but it is replaceable. And yeah, I love the soft top Defender. I obviously have one and had it for a long time and before taking the soft top off. But it is fun. It is a fun car to have a soft top on. You could get all kinds of different tonneau covers, little mini tops and stuff for it. It's a neat car. And I think I don't know why it didn't catch on in North America. Obviously not like the Jeep, but even the Glendewagen and things seemed to sort of find a foothold and continue, but they were just not willing to do the kinds of updates to the Defender that would mean sustaining it here in the United States. So, if you want one of those US ones, there are not a lot of them, but they're a much easier car to own.
Yeah, there's like, what did they import? Like 4,000 or 5,000 of those things.
Yeah,
each they're numbered in batches of 500, but there's like 500 wagons and 500 soft tops and 500 this and 500 that. So there's
it's a few thousand cars. Yeah, there's 500 in Canada. Period. We only got the 94 model car in Canada. We only got it for 1 year, and those are CDN stamped cars. So CDN and then the number, which is just kind of cool. It's a little bit unique, and there's a lot
And there's
certainly a lot fewer.
25 110s as well, right?
25 110s. Yeah, there's 25 110s, Canadian spec 110s, which are very rare. I know where 4 or 5 of them are, but yeah, those are super rare. So those are cool as well.
Unusual
The same.
cars.
Yeah, this some different things. The heating was different and stuff in them, and some other stuff, but largely the same.
Well, we should delve a little bit more in depth on the Defender buyer's guide in a future episode.
I think
because,
that's exactly right. I think part 2 is the right
or
time
if you're
for
in
that.
Quebec, part 2.
So in conclusion, everybody's least favorite segment, Land Rovers in the movies. This film's just come out. It is from your good friend, Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. It continues the DC superhero movie franchise. Black Adam has some wolf defenders at the very beginning. They're in a made-up Arabian Peninsula country. They have a militant group that is occupying that country, and that militant group has a whole variety of different interesting military vehicles, LMTVs, and there's a few Pinzgauers in there. There's some other foreign market forward control Isuzus and things painted.
Whatever they had at the movie rental place.
Whatever they had at the movie rental place. I guarantee that the whole thing was probably shot. Well, I know for a fact most of it was shot in Hungary. They shot a lot of it in Hungary. But whatever the movie rental place had, they also had some wolf defenders that are in there, which is kind of cool. So
right on. That's
Yeah.
cool. So
I think and you love
superhero
The
movie
Rock,
with
you know?
Land Rovers in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the last superhero movie we did with Land Rovers in it was maybe, was it Avengers?
Could have been.
Where the
Could have
Hulk is riding in the back of the 110 pickup
in the
or
back of the
something
110
like that.
pickup. Yeah, that's right. Going down to see Fat Thor.
Yeah, Fat Thor. Yeah,
Yep,
pretty
yep.
sure that was the last one, but it's pretty common. I think Moon Knight,
Oh,
the
yeah, Moon Knight
Disney
had a bunch, yeah.
film
Mhm, mhm,
recently,
mhm,
also
mhm.
had some defenders
It
through
sure did.
several sequences.
It sure did.
So I think it's picking up, man. Picking up.
Yeah, they're popular. They look very trucky and very military. And, I guess all those Bond films over all those years have really reinforced the fact that need to have that. Well, with that, Ike, I don't know if you've been to underpoweredhour.com lately to check out all of the great new stickers we
I
have.
go every day.
Rally team stickers. You can
Those
get
rally team stickers are cool.
You can get a tiny Defender to go with your tiny Ike, and that I think is a match made in heaven. That's just, it's what every tiny Ike desires, is a tiny rally car for him
I agree with that.
to sort of sit on top of or be adjacent to, or whatever you think. And
Cut out the window and then put it behind.
I definitely do that. That's the right way. That's the right thing to do.
That's
We may
the
have
right
to
call.
make that. We may have to make that a combo pack where you can mod your stickers too. If you haven't gotten any of these stickers yet, and for whatever reason you don't have access to the internet, you can always join us at Destination Defender, coming up November
Come on down and
12th
see
and
us.
13th. Why not come down? Use the obstacle course that Jenna and Liza are going to set up, navigation course. Come listen to us regale you with tales of Land Rovering and such. And you never know. You might just win a bottle of Nando's piri piri sauce. Maybe have a couple with us. And you can ask for Ike to give you a review in person, as unfortunately we have run out of time for that today. But I believe the Nando's people will be at Destination Defender, and we may just be able to make something happen there. But at any rate, that's it for this week. It's been Slice. Good luck on your bidding on that Canadian confiscated Camel trophy truck, Ike. Listen to
illegal contraband discovery.
Can't wait. It comes with a kilo of cocaine in the back of it, but it has to be exported. You can't sell that cocaine in Canada. It has to be exported. So as always, keep it safe, and we'll talk to you next week.
All right. See you soon.
The Underpowered Hour is produced by Liza Barris, Ike Goss, and me, Steve Barris. Pavel Svardov composed and performed our theme music. Consider supporting the show on Patreon, and if you already do, thank you. Your support makes the show possible. For even more, check out our Instagram or Facebook.